Okay, the next type of confidence interval that we will discuss is a confidence interval for the proportion. Now remember, proportion is how we're going to refer to probability from now on. So since we're doing a confidence interval, there's still the same general formula. So we're still looking for a point estimate, a critical value, and the standard error. So the point estimate for the population proportion is the estimate from the sample. So we need the sample proportion. So let's start by popping back over to Excel. And now we're going to look at the social networking tab of data. And you've seen this before. We worked with it in other Friday lab sessions. This time we're going to play around with GPA. So let's play around with let's estimate what proportion of students get good grades. What do you think? So the good grades we will define as in that 3.5 to 4.0 category. So we need to figure out what is that proportion in this sample, because this is a sample that represents the population of business to do students. So whenever you have categoric data, you pretty much need to get it in a format that you can group and count and sort and all that good stuff. So that's screaming, let's make a pivot table. So let's make a pivot table. So we'll go to Insert, Pivot Table, and we'll make one. Hopefully you remember how to do that. We are going to play with cumulative GPA. Alrighty. Hopefully you're doing this with me. If you need to stop and pull up Excel, you could do that. So what we have here is 117 students that participated, 36 of them in that highest GPA category. So why don't we come over, doesn't really matter, here. And start calculating. So 36 out of the 117, or 31%, that's our sample proportion. So that's our point estimate. Moving on, now it's time for the critical value. Well, the good thing about categoric data, when you calculate a proportion, proportions are also normally distributed. So we're actually going to use the exact same logic, and we're going to work from the 95% to the 5% to the 2.5% and translate that into a z-critical. We're going to use that same method and calculate z-critical, and we know how to do that. So let's pop back over to Excel. And use the standard normal inverse function and calculate z-critical. Now, yes, you get the exact same number, 1.96, as before. No big shock there. Moving on. Now, the standard error for the proportion is a little bit different. You are going to have to pull in sample size, and it's still in the denominator. We're still taking the square root, but we're taking the square root of a slightly larger term. There's no nice way to explain it, so let's just pop over to Excel and start putting that in. Okay, so we're going to start this formula out with the square root function. We're going to have the sample proportion times, open a set of parentheses, 1 minus the sample proportion, close the set of parentheses, and then divide by the sample size. Okay, so I believe we have closed all of the appropriate sets of parentheses. It really isn't that bad of a formula. But there we have it. And there's our standard error. So what does that mean? That's like saying 31% of the students get good grades, and the variability is about 4%. Okay, but we did not pull in the confidence level yet, so you know what's coming next. The upper limit and the lower limit. And you know how this goes. You remember from the confidence interval for the mean. So we'll take the sample proportion plus z critical times standard error, and there's our upper limit. And we'll take the sample proportion minus z critical times standard error, and there's our lower limit. So when you stand back and you look at this, you've got to make a statement. Excuse me. And the statement is, I am 95% confident, or I'm 95% certain, that somewhere between 22 and 39% of our junior level SEDU students earn between a 3.5 and a 4.0. Awesome. So we did this in Excel already. There is what your completed formula looks like. You take the sample proportion and you add and subtract Z critical times your standard error. You have to remember to end with that statement. So when you're doing your homework, don't forget you got to have some verbiage to go along with your confidence interval. When you're done with those two problems, I want you to go back to Desire to Learn, and there's a Dropbox, October 21st, and upload this Excel file into that Dropbox, and you're good to go. I hope you have a great weekend. On Monday, we're going to extend what we've done a little bit farther. There's the question, what if I don't have enough observations? So remember when we did the confidence interval for the mean, you have to have enough observations for it to be normal. What if you don't have enough? So that's what we'll come back to on Monday. I hope you have a good weekend. Like I said, don't forget to upload that file.